animation is alive and well. If you leave the Hollywood ecosystem. Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and on my channel I talk about entertainment media. I am so happy to have an excuse to revisit and actually make a video review, albeit a quick one, of one of my favorite films of 2025. Now, a bit of background context. I saw the first Ne Zha film at the cinema when it was released back in 2019. I thought it was good, but I didn't think much about that over the years until earlier this year when Ne Zha 2 was released in cinemas, and I was thinking, oh no, is there going to be anything really important that I'm going to not remember when I go into seeing this sequel? And then the film opened with what amounted to a previously on montage that refreshed my memory of the first film, at least enough to go, oh, well, there we have it. And I watched the second film and I absolutely loved it. It shot up on my 2025 list and has stayed fairly high on that list for all of these months. I saw Ne Zha twice at the cinema in its original Mandarin dialogue, and at that time I had only talked about that film on my Patreon because I do a monthly What I Watched video where I go through and I do a ranking as well as quick reviews of the films that I watched that month. That's really fun for me to do because then I can also share opinions on films that are not the latest algorithm bait of whatever is trending in that particular moment in time. This review will be mostly spoiler-free, but some of the specifics might be spoken about in broad terms. So if you want to know absolutely nothing other than whether or not I recommend it, absolutely yes, go see it. It is undoubtedly one of the best films of the year. This, however, is an English dubbed re-release, and even though I firmly believe that it is much better in Mandarin, it's still a powerful, compelling story to follow, and hopefully this new re-release will broaden the eventual physical distribution, so that way I will be able to add it to my physical media collection alongside the first film, which I already have, and I will insist that the original Mandarin dialogue be available on that physical release. Go watch Ne Zha 2, now on to my review.
Do I look like I want to read fucking subtitles?
The chocolate Leo. If I had the fucking pillar in my head.
My pull quote reads, Ne Zha 2 is exemplary animation with one of the finest, most powerful emotional climaxes of the year. The story is a moving depiction of familial love being foundational to heroic action and empathy for the world at large. I didn't really know until after I'd seen it earlier this year that this story has origins in Chinese mythology or fairy tales, whatever the preferred terminology would be. I actually learned that particular point because I was at a tea shop and there was this very nice Chinese lady who I think she might have either been the owner or the manager of the place. But anyway, I was chatting with her and I mentioned this new film, Ne Zha 2, and she was giving me a bit more of that context. And also, unrelated to the film, she was recommending a tourism company for if and when I ever get around to visiting China, which is definitely something I would love to do. But being that I am not Chinese and I don't have that full knowledge of history and the cultural context of those origins of the story, I was only really judging it as its own original fantasy action epic. The film begins with Ne Zha and Ao Bing needing to get their bodies remade after the events of the first film. Ne Zha has fire powers and Ao Bing has water powers. Ao Bing also comes from a familial background of dragons who live underwater, but they can breathe air. They're not fish or sea creatures with gills. Initially, the need for these new bodies is the main driving force of the main characters and some of the supporting leads that exist in close narrative proximity to Ne Zha and Ao Bing. But then the story turns into more of this grandiose, bombastic, anti-imperialist cinematic banger. You need to watch this at the cinema because the scale of everything is so enormous and epic that it really does suit the big screen, but also because I'm not going to make any specific accusations to you, whomever you are, because you are watching a film review on YouTube. But generally speaking, there are a lot of people who have turned away from the cinema as an art form. They're glued to their phones and streaming platforms. And a lot of those people are the type to start watching Ne Zha 2 at home on a streaming platform, and they lose patience. They're not trusting the process or going on that journey with the story. And then they turn it off before they even get to the point where things really jump to this magnificently high cinematic standard. And it becomes this experience, this thematically, dramatically rich storytelling you didn't even realize was going to happen. Well, maybe you do because I just told you. The film really benefits from having taken 6 years between releases. I wasn't even aware that a sequel was coming until this just showed up at the cinema earlier this year, but there's often an issue in Hollywood with big budget movies, franchise projects in particular, excluding Avatar because none of those executives can tell James Cameron what to do. He will fist fight you and he will win.
One of the lessons is caveat emptor.
But everything else, they repeatedly have this problem of looking ugly because the corporate higher-ups will try to cut corners, they will underpay workers, they rush the labor so that the end result looks terrible. Meanwhile, Ne Zha 2 took all of those years necessary to get the animation right, and everything looks immaculate as a result. The emotions, visuals, movements, action, everything is superb. Now, the majority of my feedback is positive. The only nitpick I would say that I have is something that I'm not a fan of in the earlier portion of this new film. There are some jokes that are in the realm of blue humor, and they're just not really to my liking. Even in films that I really enjoy, such as White Chicks, blue humor is usually lowest on my list of ranking the jokes. But in addition to the higher quality of animation, I really have to specifically commend the action. Oftentimes when you watch action in Hollywood films, the editing is overly choppy to the point of being disruptive to being able to properly see and follow the action design and choreography. However, then you go and watch action films from any number of Asian countries, China included, and suddenly the quality of action just shoots all the way up. You've got these professionals who have trained for years in various martial arts, and it's just so much fun to watch them perform action. With Ne Zha 2, you have that same quality of action design and choreography, but there's no disruptive choppy editing, partially because it's animation, so you don't even have to worry about the limits of what human beings are physically capable of. You can amplify everything because of both the animation medium, but on top of all of that, you've got magical powers and fantastical creatures. What's not to enjoy about that? Another way that this movie feels very Chinese is that there's an extremely deep, emotionally rich exploration of how meaningful family is. How often do you see Hollywood films where you never see, nor do you ever learn a single thing about the main character's family life, their parents, and so on and so forth? In Ne Zha 2, you are learning about Ne Zha's deep relationship with his parents. You get a brief introduction to his brothers. That's a bit of a mild spoiler, but I think we'll get to meet them more properly in a Ne Zha 3. You are also continuing to follow Albing's relationship with his father. You get to meet the family of a sort of villain turned anti-hero character. That's also a mild spoiler, but there's so many things going on in this movie that I'm just going ahead and saying them. The love that these characters have for their families is enormously important to who they are, what motivates their actions, their emotions. It's such rich storytelling. I cannot emphasize and praise that enough. And expanding to a more macro lens, this story is an anti-imperialist, anti-colonial epic. Watching this earlier in the year was the absolute most perfect way to hold me over while I have been struggling in withdrawals from James Cameron's Avatar. A big fantasy blockbuster that loudly calls out imperialist colonizers. Oh, I will show up every time.
It's my favorite movie of all time.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't know that that's where the story was going until we got further into Ne Zha 2, and then whenever I have rewatched the film and I have the full picture of who everyone is and what's really going on, that's when I'm able to understand the full vision of what the story is about and the highly impactful themes that have been woven into it. Any of my regular viewers know that one of the things I love to watch is armed struggle against oppressors. It's cathartic, it's motivational, it energizes me to keep going. And this is another mild spoiler, but I will say it anyway. Here's your moment to click off if you don't want to hear this next bit. The demons in Ne Zha 2, they represent the other with a capital O, as in fear of the other. So when you see them band together and unite, that's where some of the most impactful catharsis comes from in following the story. Overall, even though I absolutely stand by my preference for the original Chinese version with the original Mandarin dialogue, I'm very happy for the chance to get to see this on the big screen again. Time permitting, I still want to go again. That's why I have a monthly movie pass. The original Mandarin and the style of line delivery in Mandarin is more synchronized with not only the ways that the characters move their mouths, but the line delivery matches the way the characters move and emote. It kind of feels like The English dub is leaning towards a more naturalistic style of line delivery. And in a different movie, that would be fine. But also, just in general, I'm biased in that I always prefer to watch films in whichever original language they were made in. Ne Zha 2, I will reiterate, is one of the best films I've seen this year. I'm very ready for Ne Zha 3. I don't know if they plan to make many more or simply close things off with a trilogy. I'm ambivalent about how many they should make in total. All I will say is, if you have the creative artistic vision and motivation to make more, then absolutely go ahead. If you would like to make something else instead, create that. As long as it stays art and not a corporate product, I will keep watching. And also, there's a mid-credit scene, so don't miss that.